Story number 1. The intercom flared, cut off, and the school exhaled in the hush that followed. The building felt like it had turned its face toward me. I stepped into tile and mirrors to become no one, but the corridor began to measure itself with shoes. When I finally edged out, a stranger occupied the spine of the hallway like a chess piece no one remembered setting down. His mouth looked applied rather than born, an expression lacquered onto skin. He kept to the center line, moving without looking, as if the corridor itself were leading him toward me. There was a lockdown, and I had no room to claim, no roll call to shelter under. So I found the nearest bathroom and folded myself into a stall. The partition pressed a cool rectangle against my shoulder. The light above rendered edges too sharp to ignore. I decided to practice obedience by stillness. If the world beyond the door wanted to sort itself out, it could do it without my help. The tiles beneath my shoes stored cold the way metal holds a reflection, imperfect but insistent. The speaker in the ceiling stayed mute. From the corridor came arrangement, not sound at first, but the blueprint of it. A pressure that made me aware of where the door ended and where the gap to the floor began. Then came footsteps. They arrived like pencil marks, clean and even, approaching in the hallway and moving past with a neat confidence that suggested ownership. I didn't really know what to do, which made every decision heavy with pretend authority. I kept my eyes on the stall's lock and tried to make my breathing quiet enough to be mistaken for part of the room. The steps faded, then pivoted. The rhythm returned, not rushed, not curious, just precise. Whoever was out there traced the corridor as if correcting a line. Then they walked right past it again. The second pass held a message I couldn't read. The third pass began to feel like a test. I didn't lift the latch. I didn't lean to the gap to look. A bad feeling can be specific without owning any facts. Mine sat just behind the ribs and pointed outward like a compass needle. The fourth pass arrived from the opposite direction, then another, whoever it was pacing back and forth. The corridor itself seemed to participate, stretching and shrinking to keep time. Beyond the door, everything else stayed completely silent. The toilet paper holder, the sink, the mirror, objects waited like obedient nouns. The stall breathed on my behalf. When the steps finally dwindled, I counted to a number that felt like proof, waited longer than proof required, and unlatched the door. I washed my hands for the courage of doing something ordinary, then eased the bathroom door open with 2 fingers. The hallway beyond looked staged, lockers aligned like vertebrae, ceiling panels like blank index cards. Floor wax turned to glass. Far down the corridor stood a man exactly in the middle, a man standing in the hallway. He didn't belong to any poster or assembly or parent night I could remember. His clothes were formal, wearing a suit and a tie that reorganized the place around him. His eyes held the mid-distance with a patience that felt learned. His mouth, though, his mouth violated the geometry of his face. A large, fake-looking grin that seemed to be painted on a little too high. He did not look at me, and that made him look at everything else, and he began to move. Not a drift, not a stalk, simply an exact compliance with the corridor's center seam. He walked towards me slowly, without angling his body. He did not brush a wall or glance into a doorway. Center of the hallway might as well have been rails beneath him. The building's air stood still, as if told to hold its breath. I let a single step carry me backward, then another. The man's progress didn't acknowledge my subtraction. He remained the diagram he seemed to prefer. Line, distance, endpoint. My mind clicked into inventory mode. Every door became a potential sentence I could say if intercepted. I belong to this room, to that teacher, to those names on the list. My hands found the corridor's cool cinder block and pressed, as if the wall could draw me into a safer version of the building. The steps I heard then did not belong to me. They organized themselves ahead and behind, As though the man's movement had taught the hallway a new rhythm, I turned the corner and let the next corridor adopt me. Poster board on cork breathed with the ductwork. A drinking fountain waited with its sterile steel smile. I rehearsed a line I didn't want to say. The teacher came to the door, recognized me, let me in, and promised myself I would get to that door. The geometry behind me updated. I couldn't see him, but the pattern he carried traveled faster than people. It reached around corners the way cold reaches under a blanket. My need stopped asking permission. I took off running, not the dramatic kind that loves the echo of its own noise, but a disciplined subtraction of distance. My body turned corridors into fractions. My shoes found friction, not speed. I let the building become measured. 6 doors, turn, 10 windows, turn, 2 trophy cases, turn. At the next junction I braked and forced my steps to civility. A corridor full of classrooms prefers manners. I approached a door that promised safety by routine. The blinds were down. The room number made a small, decent claim about order. I pressed my palm against the glass. A steady, deliberate rhythm. Chairs stirred. The knob turned. The gap became welcome. The teacher came to the doorbell. And this time it wasn't rehearsal. She recognized me without asking for evidence and let me in. Inside, the air had the close quiet of people who have been told to be quiet. I felt the class examining whether I was a problem or a message. I chose message. I told them what I'd seen. A man standing in the hallway, wearing a suit and a tie, with that large, fake-looking grin that refused to work like a mouth. Said he kept to the center of the hallway, that he didn't look left or right, that he walked towards me slowly, like someone taught to obey an invisible line. I said there was a lockdown, and that everything had been completely silent, except those measured footsteps passing and returning and passing again. A few students constructed softer explanations out loud. Substitute, visitor, fundraiser, ceremony. The words hovered like labels, looking for a jar, but none of them fit. And the way the corridor had been paced did not feel like a person with a reason. The teacher listened, eyes moving as if she were reviewing a film she hadn't yet seen. She told us to stay away from the windows. Stay low, stay ready to pretend the ordinary could resume at any moment. We waited. Waiting is not passive. It is work the body performs on itself. Every minute in that room learned a new pose, listening without moving, breathing without comment, understanding without a story. I kept thinking about that grin. A smile discloses his erased, made the rest of his face look like a polite mask borrowed in a hurry. If he had asked me for directions, I would have lied about more than directions. The speaker breathed. It coughed a little electricity and offered the sentence humans give other humans to make them compliant. The lockdown was over. The teacher thanked the air itself out of habit. She lifted the blinds an inch, then another. Testing light the way you test water. The class stretched. Everyone tried on their regular voices and regular faces, as though posture alone could deny that the hour had been carved out of the day with a different knife. I collected my composure like loose papers, my chest practiced casual. But what the mind cannot safely keep it often hides under the furniture of simple phrases. I never got a good explanation for who he was, and no one ever told me why he paced, why the smile misfit its frame, why the corridor seemed to approve of his measurements. The day moved forward as if you could staple it back together and not see the seam. Hallway noises returned, the friction of shoes, the murmur of schedules, the polite coughs of routine. The building resumed its imitation of a place that belongs to everyone. I left class with the others. At the corner, I paused and looked down the long axis where I had first seen him. The space was the same, except for the part of me that had changed, was really strange. How a place you think you know can keep a secret, like a second mouth. I can only assume he belonged to the reason no one wanted to name, Or maybe he belonged to the corridor itself. Maybe some buildings, when told to be still, conjure someone to walk their center line so they don't have to feel empty. Days, no, not days, moments disguised as days passed after that. And I tested small theories in private. If I returned to the bathroom, would I hear the footsteps perform their patient tracing again? If I stood dead center of the hallway alone, would the building feel me as a correction, an eraser mark it needed to clean? I never did those experiments. I learned a more practical lesson. Some places lend you their ordinary on the condition that you do not ask to see the receipt. And yet, sometimes when ceilings buzz, or the air conditioner edits a room into sharper angles, I remember him, not a person exactly, but an alignment, and I remember the figure who kept to the middle, moving as if the architecture had whispered instructions only he could hear, and I remember the mouth that did not join the face it wore. Can only assume the world contains more of those alignments than we prefer to admit, and maybe they appear when systems are told to behave, or maybe they appear when a building asks for someone to walk it into believing itself again. So I go where I am supposed to go now. I answer when I am called. When the intercom speaks, I listen for the other voice behind it, the one that says, "Keep to the line. Do not brush the walls. Pretend the reason arrived with you, and if I find myself in a corridor emptied on purpose, I will choose a door, any door, and knock the way a person knocks who expects the teacher to understand. If no one comes, I will not wait in the bathroom again. I will not grant footsteps the power to turn silence into a ruler. The building can keep its secrets. I will keep my shape." Story number 2. A door shook without a hand to claim it, and 30 pairs of eyes learned what silence can weigh. You plan a lesson, the building plans you. I kept seeing motion in the glass, never a face, only a decision moving away. When the building went still and the world outside the door was supposed to be empty, something still found us. What follows is not proof, it is the shape of something that insisted on being heard without showing itself. I teach in a building that hums even when no one speaks. Air returns, a projector cooling down, the subtle throb of young attention. I'm a high school teacher, and my classroom is ordinary, a rectangle, a single door with a narrow window, desks that learn the posture of the hour. On the day I'm telling you about, the lesson was simple, the rhythm familiar, and the corridor beyond our wall felt like a river I didn't have to watch. The first interruption arrived as force on wood, no warning, no voice, just weight striking the panel hard enough to stop every sentence in the room. I walked to the door fast, trying not to broadcast irritation. The glass showed an empty hall, lockers standing like folded arms. When I looked out into the hallway, nobody was there. I held the handle, waited, and opened it to the echo of my own breath. No footsteps faded, nothing waited. Back inside, a few kids grinned. Mischief is a language they speak fluently. Some of the students in my class asked about it, and I told them not to reward ghosts with discussion. We returned to our work. It wasn't the lesson I remembered that day. It was the feeling that the room had been tapped like a fish tank. It happened again. Different passage, same interruption, mass on wood. Like a demand disguised as a joke. This time I was already looking. Through the panel's thin rectangle, I caught the smear of someone's sleeve sliding out of view. A motion the way a hand might erase itself. I stepped into the hall quicker, trying to turn surprise into speed, but the corridor held only fluorescent patience and recycled air. I went over to the door, opened it, and looked outside. Nothing. I was not on time to catch whoever had done it running away. We resumed, we always resume, and teachers learn to feed order to a room the way a metronome feeds time to a song. And yet the building held a second heartbeat now, the anticipation of that strike, as you might be able to guess. This happened yet again during the next class period. I wondered if leaving the door open would starve the prank of its thrill. if the visible kills the urge to startle. But I didn't. A closed door is a boundary that protects children. An open one is a shrug. That afternoon, the force never returned. There was no knocking on my door. And I pretended not to care that I kept listening for it anyway. I didn't report it or anything because I didn't think it was a big deal. You don't report static. You log it somewhere private, a mental note that a pattern wants to happen. I slept on it, if sleep is the word for that light grey place where a person reviews door frames and the thin lane of glass that steals more than it gives. In the morning, I told myself this was ordinary adolescent theatre. A door becomes a stage prop, the class becomes an audience, and the curtain cue is the teacher's frown. I was teaching my classes again, and the building breathed like a living thing you learned to trust. Hallway traffic flowed, lessons landed, pencils danced their small choreographies. Then the building changed its rules. The phone on the wall chirped and died. I read the memo on the screen. The one you rehearse for, but never welcome. I announced it to my students, and we executed the checklist everyone carries in their bones. First, I locked the classroom door. Then I turned off all the lights and moved the sea of desks into a low tide near the back wall. I also covered all the windows. The projector went dark. Screens dimmed like closing eyes. Hushed breathing filled the room in even stitches. Out in the hall, the world was supposed to be a museum. No tours, no motion, everything roped off by routine. The students were supposed to keep quiet, and they did, remarkably well. The way kids surprise you when you underestimate how brave they are. A hand squeezed another hand. A shoe scuffed and then froze. A backpack zipper stopped like a held breath. The room learned to be small together. Time did what time does in a sealed room. It stretched, then looped. It was completely quiet, and then the building remembered the door. A blow landed on the panel hard, deliberate, mean with purpose. Not a test, a message. Every head turned in one motion like iron filings answering a magnet. My heart dropped its professional pace and found the rhythm of someone about to see something they can't explain. I rose, because that's the job. You get up. I got up and walked over to the door and looked through the small window. Nobody was there. The corridor wore its public emptiness like a badge. Nothing moved. No shadow owned the act. Behind me, a breath hitched and stopped. I didn't turn around. I kept my palm on the handle and did not open it. I waited. The second strike never came. Silence folded itself back over us. Clumsy and imperfect. Some of the students were talking about it now, and I told them to pipe down. We returned the floor to the practiced stillness, to the choreography of being invisible. The building held. No more impacts. No more flickers in glass. When the all clear arrived, it didn't sound like relief so much as a permission slip to resume pretending. The lockdown was lifted. I switched on the lights, picked up the thread of the lesson like a dropped stitch, and we tried to remember what mattered before a door learned our names. Things resumed as normal. The day moved, the clocks lied, and nothing else struck the wood. After dismissal, the hallways became a soft river of voices again. Teachers debrief in clusters. We balance gravity with gallows humor. Swap facts like trading cards. Build a shared story that lets us walk to our cars without seeing every shadow as a choice. I went hunting for an answer, because we always do. I talked with some other teachers until I found the right combination of rumor and certainty. The alert had not been a drill. It was because a student in the school had made direct threats against another student. The words sat like cold coins in a palm. That explained the caution. It did not explain the door. No one else I spoke to mentioned impacts during the seal. I asked some other teachers, and nobody had knocked on their doors. At my room alone, my door alone. The building had many panels, and only one seemed to be a drum. It's a lonely kind of math. Back in my classroom, after the rush, I studied the wood like it held a confession. The scuffs near the handle were old, months of keys missing the slot. backpacks grazing, sneakers flirting with thresholds. Nothing new bloomed on the surface to tell me a story. I slid my palm across the grain. It felt like a pulse that belonged to the building, not to me. I replayed what I knew. When I looked out into the hallway, nobody was there, twice in ordinary hours, and once during a sealed building. Force found the panel and refused a face. I looked through the small window and saw absence where intent should live. There was no knocking on my door for the rest of that day, but the memory kept tapping from the inside, asking to be let out. Could it have been the same student the alert was about? Maybe. How would anybody be able to walk around in the hallways like that during a lockdown? Procedures are simple, compliance is not, but the cadence of the strikes felt older than school drama, older than the little economies of attention young people trade. It felt like impatience without a body. I wrote the incident down the way teachers write everything: date, period, behavior, response. Then I deleted the date and the period, because I didn't want to build a box for phenomenon. I told myself I'd report it if it continued, and then it didn't. After that day, I never had any more knocking on my door during class. The pattern ended as abruptly as it had proposed itself. Mysteries are rude that way. They borrow your balance and offer no receipt. Still, teaching is built on the small repetitions that write identity into places. I started sitting at a different angle, one eye sharing its day with the glass. I shifted the front row an inch away from the panel, not enough to become a rule, just enough to feel like I'd done something. The students noticed nothing, or they were kind enough to treat my adjustments as a teacher's harmless quirks. Sometimes, when the hallway is a zipper of lockers and the traffic thins to a hush, I study that slice of glass, its shape, its purpose, its meanness. A window in a door is a compromise, safety through visibility, vulnerability through visibility. You see, you are seen. On bad days, it feels like an invitation for attention, to behave without consequence. On good days, it is a promise that help can see the shape of trouble and move toward it. The memory visits like weather, doesn't bring an answer, it brings a change in air. And I think about how I announced it to my students with a steady voice and started following the procedures now, and how first I locked the classroom door. I think about how then I turned off all the lights in the classroom, and I also covered all the windows, and how the room gathered itself like a small animal making itself big with silence. I think about how I got up and walked over to the door, because a job is a promise you keep in front of scared children. But I think about how I went back inside my classroom and then told my class that nothing was there, but that we were safe. That adult sentences can be bridges even when you don't know what's on the far bank. And when night gathers in the building's bones and the corridor lights settle into their low-duty glow, I sometimes linger. I put my palm flat on the panel, feel its cool, and remember the lesson the door taught me. Not every unseen thing is harmless, and not every unexplained thing is hungry, and some events arrive only to draw a circle around our routines and ask whether they can bear surprise. Mine did. We kept learning. I wish I could end with a face, a name, a motive. I cannot. What I have is a door that accepted force 3 times and refused to name the source, a class that held together under pressure, and a teacher who learned that professionalism can coexist with awe. It was really weird and remains sort of a mystery to me. Story number 3. I was not the only engine idling in the dark. Something else waited with its lights off, learning my name without asking. If you have ever felt eyes on your back in a hallway that knows you by your locker number, you know the weight I carried that day. I told myself routine is safe, until routine became the easiest map to follow me by. And security doors make a campus feel safe until a stranger decides your route belongs to him. By the time anyone said the word lockdown, the story had already chosen me. This happened when I was a 17-year-old girl and in high school. I wore a jersey with my surname stitched above my heart and learned balance on varnished wood. I played volleyball when I was in high school. and the rhythm of drills stitched my days together. The street where my parents lived felt like a set of repeated lines, mailboxes, hedges, the neighbor's porch that always needed paint, and I believed in the safety of patterns, the mercy of the ordinary. We practiced whenever the building gave us a window because the gym had to be shared with the other sports teams. I liked the quiet travel, the way the world thinned out and made room for thought. I eased off the driveway, checked my mirrors by habit, and saw it, a car that was parked on the side of our street. It sat too still, pretending to belong. I told myself it was nothing. Then the car's headlights turned on. I drove. The quiet held, but it felt like a quiet that listened. The other vehicle rolled forward and started driving down the street after me. I tested it with a turn. It followed. Another turn. The same. I was starting to wonder if I was being followed. A sentence that tasted like metal. I did not recognize the car. No sticker, no dent, no memory attached to it, just a new shape grafted onto my morning. I gave myself a simple mission: reach the campus where doors require codes and strangers appear smaller under fluorescent light. I kept driving to school, willing distance to convert into safety. At the entrance, I signaled. I turned into the student parking lot, an open grid of white lines and the scattered signatures of early arrivals. I chose a spot and parked pretty close to the school. The other car drifted to the farthest corner, as if it were allergic to company, as if it knew the edges better than the center. I waited inside the vehicle, hands still on the wheel. So I sat in my car and waited for a minute or two. However, nobody got out. The car across the lot was backed into a parking space. Its windshield turned toward me like a mirror that refused to tell the truth. I studied the glass for a face and found only a smear of movement. Routine tugged at my sleeve. I opened my door and walked inside, letting the building fold around me with its posters, announcements, and scuffed thresholds. Gym air has its own weather: resin, rubber, effort. The ball bit my forearms. My feet learned short, honest steps. Time became breath and count. When it was over, the day shifted into classes. A stack of rooms and bells, and the ordinary gravity of notes and assignments. My locker waited where it always waited. The dial stubborn at a certain number. I stood by my locker, letting the clatter of the hallway rinse the morning out of me. Then the rinsing failed. I saw this guy a long ways away, just staring at me. My memory had no place to put him in. He also looked a little bit older. I tried to file that stare under anything else: tired senior, office aide, someone's brother, but the label wouldn't stick. I played the oldest trick I knew and pretended not to see. I looked away and then looked again. And he was still staring at me. Voices of friends washed past. I could hear laughter, door hinges, pencil boxes sliding, but my focus locked onto the stranger who did not blink. My stomach knew the story before my mouth did. Every step I took felt like an answer someone else had already read. I told myself to keep moving. I made it to my next class and sat down, making my body smaller without meaning to. The board filled with symbols. The teacher talked about limits approaching, but not touching. And that felt like a joke told to me by the day itself. Then the intercom found its calmest voice. The door latched, blinds drew, the school went into a lockdown. I had no idea what it was about. We moved the way everyone is taught to move: quiet, deliberate, a choreography no one wants to practice. We waited. We measured minutes by breath and the hiss of air in the vents. When the door opened again, the room had the same chairs, but a different air. We slipped back into the corridor's current. Word spread sideways through the building. Rumor first, then shape. And by the end of the school day, though, I found out that it was for a suspicious man in the hallway. He didn't belong to us, like somebody who was not a student had stood where students should stand, carrying no credentials or identification. When people asked him to explain himself, he chose the exit. When questioned, he ran away. And the story gathered uniforms and reports. Before the last bell released us, news pinned the outline down. He was arrested for trespassing. Everybody was talking about it. Teachers adjusted their tones, friends compared sightings, and lockers banged like punctuation. I kept my story folded small inside my chest. It had to be the same guy. It rattled there like a coin in a dryer. I walked to the lot with my key between my fingers and a plan to go straight home. The far corner, his corner, looked empty. But absence can be a trick. It really creeps me out that a stranger could learn my shape from a distance, that a routine could be turned into a leash. I sat behind the wheel and breathed until my ribs agreed to loosen. That should have been the end. A report filed, a name on paper, the town relieved of a trespasser. But endings in real life prefer to fade rather than stop. In the weeks that followed, vigilance took the spare room in my mind. I changed my route. I changed where I parked. I told the coach, then told the office. We made a pact to share the weight of watching. My parents added light to the front steps and rules that felt like common sense dressed in armor. I practiced saying the uncomfortable sentences out loud. Someone followed me. A stranger watched me. I don't feel safe. The weirdness did not escalate. It refused to leave. In the library, dragging a finger down a page, I would feel a tug that made me check the window. At an intersection, a sedan would idle beside me, just long enough for me to wonder, then drift away. In the gym, the bleachers would hold their line of boards like a mouth keeping secrets. I learned to tell the difference between fear that warns and fear that lies. I learned that distance is not the same as safety. I learned that a vehicle was backed into a parking space can be louder than a shout. When the officer told me the trespasser had been processed and released to a list of fines and a promise to stay away, I did not feel triumphant. I felt the quiet of a door closing in a building I couldn't fully map. I drove differently. I lived a little differently. Habits remain after reasons go, checking the mirrors, choosing the path under cameras, carrying company through long corridors. If you have your own far corner, an empty space that watches you back, listen to that warning, and you are not required to be polite to a threat. Ask for company, name the thing, let other eyes share the watch. I wish I could tell you I never think of him anymore. But sometimes memory walks me across the lot, and I look up to find the corner empty and feel both grateful and cautious. I step into the day anyway. The scoreboard still flips points. The ball still arcs. The ordinary world keeps offering its small, shining tasks. And I keep the promise I made to myself in that lot, to hear the alarm before the echo, to trust my bones, and to leave whenever I need, to wonder if he was stalking me no more. Story number 4. They locked the building for a reason none of us could see. But it had my name on it. I learned how loud silence becomes when it chooses you. A stranger at a crowded table decided whether I would walk out or disappear. The door opened on a line of faces, and one of them read my future aloud. What saved me wasn't luck. It was a quiet student's decision to stop pretending he didn't hear. I loved the easy rhythm of an ordinary school day, the scrape of chairs, the drift of chalk dust, the way fluorescent light made halos on the edges of the whiteboard. I was thinking about nothing heavier than the sandwich in my bag and whether a friend would want to trade cookies, when the room shifted, as if the air had been turned down to a colder setting. An announcement cut across our routine, and we had a lockdown. No one stood up, no one argued. We became still life figures, a row of shoulders, a forest of desks, a teacher with a hand lifted halfway to the light switch, frozen mid-thought. Someone pulled the blinds until only a thin bar of daylight lay across the floor, like a ruler measuring our breath. Silence can be a discipline. I learned it fast. I remember hearing that it was not a drill, and that made me kind of nervous. The words landed without drama, but they took root. My mind rehearsed every wrong story it could invent. an angry person in the halls, a mistake that had turned into a threat, a stranger who didn't belong to our map of faces. I looked at the door handle as if it were a compass needle and wondered which way it would point if danger came looking. No screens lit up with answers. Rumors didn't bloom in our palms. We had nothing except the dimness, the click of our own thoughts. And the way the room seemed to inhale and hold. We waited. We sat in our classroom with the lights off, and everybody was really quiet. Every tiny motion felt amplified anyway. Someone straightening a book, someone folding their hands tighter, the teacher setting her jaw in a way that told me she had run this play before and wanted to win again. The more time that went by, the more and more nervous I became. Fear is cunning. It offers bargains. If you don't move, nothing will change. If you stay small, you'll stay safe. The desk edge pressed into my forearm like a promise I couldn't cash. I counted my breaths and then lost count, and then started again. I tried to tell myself that everything would be fine. It didn't sound convincing. Even inside my own mind, I was safe and in a locked classroom with a bunch of other people. Safety felt like a math problem nobody had written on the board yet. In reality, though, I had no clue what was going on. I tracked the hallway with my imagination, stitching together the steps I'd take if we were told to leave, the friends I'd pull by the sleeve if they froze. I pictured the nurse's office with its poster about kindness and its cabinet of bandages and I wondered if kindness and gauze ever had to work the same job. We waited longer. The air grew stale. The wall clock pretended not to move. Then the phone rang in our classroom. The sound sliced the room into before and after. My teacher answered it and quietly talked. Her posture changed almost invisibly. The voice at the other end had put a weight into her hands, and she held it like someone trained not to drop anything fragile. Then she hung up. No one exhaled the moment back to normal. We let the quiet stand where it was and do its work. When the knock finally came, it didn't startle me. It was simply the shape that fear takes when it wants a face. The door opened on authority. The principal in a suit that made steadiness look ordinary. Two officers whose presence felt like firm walls rather than alarms. And a man I didn't recognize. Their eyes swept the room, counting, confirming. They all looked around the room and then called my name. My name sounded like a string pulled through cloth, gentle and final. I didn't know what they wanted, but I got up and walked over to them. I wasn't brave, I was obedient to the moment. And sometimes those looked the same. The hallway smelled like floor wax and something metallic I couldn't place. My footsteps sounded measured because I made them that way. If fear could take inventory, it would have written down the way I kept my shoulders level. We moved at a pace that didn't invite panic. I counted trophy cases and bulletin boards on the way, as if labeling the path might keep it real. We turned where I always turned, to hand in permission slips. And suddenly the carpet felt like a boundary. They walked with me all the way to the principal's office and told me what was going on. The office was a room I knew, but now it had new rules. The principal's voice was steady, in the way a bridge is steady even when it sways. He slid a truth toward me, and I picked it up with both hands because I had to. I was told that several students had been planning to kidnap me, and they had stopped it. The sentence didn't fit the furniture, it didn't fit the wall calendar. It didn't fit the person I believed I was, the person who mostly moved through hallways unnoticed, except by friends who knew my jokes. This was a shock to me, as you could imagine, because I was completely unaware of it. I looked down at my shoes as if the laces might offer a rebuttal. They didn't. They explained how the rumor had turned real. They told me about the table in the cafeteria I had passed 100 times. The one that belonged to a small gravity of boys who felt older than they were. They were a group of guys who I was not friends with, but I did know who they were. Names I recognized, faces I never needed to memorize. One of them dealt in small bags and loud reputations. I'd noticed him the way you notice a loose step, not fascinating, just something you avoid on instinct. They all sat together at a lunch table. Their laughter staked out territory. Their posture dared the room to make them move, and at the edge of that circle, there was someone else. Apparently, there was this one other guy who was not really in their friend group, but they were cool with, he carried himself like a person practicing invisibility. That guy sat at their lunch table and didn't really talk much, but they just kind of let him sit with them. I had seen him in that way you see light on water. Present, shifting, easy to overlook if you're moving too fast. Well, I think he was kind of a loner, or else just really shy or something. The officers didn't offer theatrics. They offered a sequence. A conversation at that table had changed key. Jokes hardened into logistics. A name, my name, had entered the center of their talk and stayed there too long. Anyways, this guy overheard the other guys talking about kidnapping me. He sat with his tray and his quiet and weighed what he had heard. He could have convinced himself he was mistaken, that the word would deflate on its own. He didn't. He carried the story to someone who could put it where it belonged. He put his own name on the line so I could keep mine. After the kid reported it, the school did an investigation. Adults drew lines between words and actions. They checked cameras and corridors, cross-referenced times and faces. Pressure was applied the way pressure is supposed to be applied, not cruelly, not theatrically, but just steadily enough to test the truth. Stories that swagger in groups sometimes collapse when they have to stand alone under a light. I didn't watch the questions land, but I felt the results. The building locked down again while they split the boys apart. The edges of bravado crumbled. Plans shrank to their actual size, but they were expelled and the older guys were arrested. The official language made it sound tidy. The human part didn't. I thought about parents at kitchen tables, about trash bags being filled with clothes, about a young man staring at a ceiling he didn't recognize. Consequences are never clean, even when they are correct. That night I rewrote the map of my own life. The places I thought were safe were still safe, but now I understood why. Not because danger didn't exist, but because someone decided to step between danger and a stranger. I wrote a note that said, "Thank you," though I had no address for it. There is a difference between being quiet and being complicit. I wrote to myself, there is a difference between fear and caution. I folded the paper into my notebook like a seed. I promised I would practice both differences until they felt like reflexes. I promised I would look for the kid on the edge of the table, the one who knows things and rarely speaks. And I would make room for his voice if it ever needed a place to land. In the days that followed, the building returned to its ordinary noise. Lockers shutting, announcements about fundraisers, lingering laughter on the way out to the buses. I didn't return to ordinary. I walked different routes, not because I was terrified, but because I had learned the exits and wanted to carry that knowledge like a key rather than a wound. I checked in on friends with more patience. I watched people I didn't know with more curiosity and less judgment. I stopped mistaking a crowd for a shield. When someone looked alone, I sat beside them long enough to ask a second time how they were and to wait for the real answer. Sometimes safety is a person deciding to notice. Sometimes it is a person deciding to speak. And if you ever wonder whether to speak, this is me telling you, speak. You might never get a headline or a handshake. You might never know the distance you shortened between someone and harm, but a hallway will stay ordinary. A phone will ring only for homework questions and rides home. A door will open for the right reasons. And somewhere, a person will walk outside under the same sky that now feels changed because they trust the quiet again. I'm just glad that other kid spoke up. Story number 5. The screen in my hand brightened like a small stage, and something stepped into the light. An uncanny picture of a classroom door looked straight through the glass, waiting as if it could speak my name back to me. The line beneath it didn't ask, it told, A stranger addressing a student he shouldn't know exists, far beyond the wall. A lens inhaled the corridor and exhaled me. I stayed seated, stared, and the school stared back. I was supposed to be present, but focus is a sieve and a phone is where attention leaks the fastest. A new notification slid in. Someone had added me on Snapchat. The handle meant nothing, no mutuals, no clue I could recognize. Only that cold little tap from the outside. I told myself it was maybe another student. A face from a different section. Someone who knew my face, but not my name. I accepted. Context arrived like a breath pressed against warm glass. A picture of the classroom door not 5 steps from my desk. The frame held the laminated placard where my teacher kept her surname. The edges I knew by heart. The decorations I'd seen 100 times, streamers and printed quotes that someone had once decorated with care. I thumbed a casual reply, the kind that tries to mask concern with manners. Another image landed, shot from farther down the hallway. A new angle as if a survey were underway. This time, words floated on the skin of the photo like a command. Leave your class. My fingers typed the only honest answer. I can't. Why? The next message vacuumed the air out of my chest. A selfie. A really strange-looking guy. The lens too close to old. Careful eyes. Not a student. A grown man whose expression suggested he had measured rooms before and found them wanting. No sticker. No caption. Just a flat photo of a face that did not belong to this building. I blocked him and let my phone rest on the desk like a hot stone I didn't dare pick up again. Teaching continued its steady current at the front of the room, but the water in me refused to move. My body stayed still while my mind mapped every hinge and seam. The door stopped being an exit and turned into a question mark hammered into the wall. My classmates breathed, scribbled, turned pages, made tiny adjustments to backpacks and sleeves. I leaned into stillness and listened to the room in a new way. A way that hears what it can lose. The vent above us drew a long, even line through the air. My own pulse kept time with it, but I refused to look at my watch or at anything that could tell me how long I had been holding the same breath. I looked at the placard, then the viewing window, then the reflection in that window that placed my eyes exactly where a camera would expect to find them. The idea that someone might be on the other side of that window, someone who could read the film of the room the way a diver reads water, made the muscles in my neck tighten until they felt like wire. My chair creaked, and I froze. Not because of the sound, but because I had just taught myself that even the furniture could feel like a signal. I didn't text anyone, I didn't stand, I didn't pretend to tie a shoe just to check the hall. I folded myself into the ordinary and tried to look like a person whose name hadn't been stolen. The building's speakers woke and gave us a single word that turns open space into a set of instructions. Lockdown. Chairs slid, the windows turned into walls with a few practiced motions. The door handle received a stare from every face, as if a stare could weld it shut. Immediately my thoughts clicked into one shape, the creepy face from my screen. My suspicion wedged into the hinges and sat there. Certain, unwilling to consider an alternative. If a test had asked me to show my work, I would have drawn a straight line from the photo to the door. From my unearned Snapchat ad to the building's shuttered heartbeat. I stopped blinking. I traced the seam where the floor meets the frame and waited for a shadow to pause there. I waited for breathing I couldn't account for. I waited for a footstep that would align itself with the edge of the window and claim the room as if it had signed some secret document. But nothing crossed, nothing introduced itself. The silence did not belong to him or to me. The silence belonged to the building. When the order lifted, the rooms unfolded like paper boats after rain. Rumor outran explanation the way wind outruns the storm that made it. A suspicious man had been found inside the school. Someone said, walked out with the kind of practiced calm that wears keys on a lanyard. The same guy from the snaps. That was the version traveling fastest. And it fit like a cruel puzzle piece. People supplied details the way people always do, knitting confidence from threads that might not hold. I nodded in the places nods belong and said little. Because what I had didn't feel like a story. It felt like a measuring tape pulled tight around me. Later, in a quieter corner. The arithmetic unsettled me more than any rumor could. How did he get my Snapchat? How did he know where I sat, which classroom? I don't know how strangers find doors like that, and I only know my screen became a peephole, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. The thought gave me the creeps in a way that is all texture and no volume, the kind that keeps you polite in bright rooms and then takes the lights out the moment you are alone. I reported what I had to the office in words that felt too small for the shape of the event. Then to the police, where the sentences clicked into a form and received a case number that did not comfort me. And after that, the world insisted on continuing. The way it always does. Bells, assignments. The choreographed shuffle of leaving one lesson and arriving at another. I learned to watch differently without turning myself into a periscope. I learned which posters could darken a window best, which angles on a phone camera can show a door without showing a face, which routines return dignity to a room after fear has taken some of it. People will tell you that vigilance is a posture, but I found it works better as a temperature. Set it to steady. Let it warm everything without boiling anything over. The stranger never messaged me again. The handle he used fell off my recent list like a leaf into a storm drain. That should have made the memory lighter. It didn't. It made the memory sharper, outlined in absence. Confidence came back in careful steps anyway, because it has to. I walked the hall and let the lights write me into the floor again. I sat at my desk and let the paper remind me I had work to do. I looked at the door and called it what it has always been, a hinge, not a mouth, wood and metal, not a verdict. When people ask me now what the scariest part was, I don't say the lockdown, and I don't say the selfie. I say it was the familiarity in the images, how casual the framing was, as if the building itself had taken the shots for him. Fear likes to pretend it's a story with a final paragraph, but some stories are just rooms you keep walking through. This one left its outline on the wall where the light hits in late afternoon, a kind of watermark that only I can see. It doesn't decide my days. It doesn't choose my steps. If anything, it taught me a new arithmetic. What's mine? What's ours? What belongs to no one? And if I ever see that looking guy again, even from a distance, I won't let him measure me. I'll be the one who names the frame. Story number 6. I thought I left the stranger behind when I pulled away from the restaurant. I was wrong. The dark followed me home on a silent set of spokes. He dressed himself like a shadow and stared as if my name belonged to him. The moment I looked away, he vanished. The moment I exhaled, he returned. My street is the kind of place where porch lights stay steady and neighbors wave without asking questions. The questions arrived anyway. I have told this story in a voice I barely recognize because the house changed after it. Doors felt thinner. Windows felt like eyes. If you have ever felt watched inside your own walls, you already know how this ends, with the soundless weight of a bicycle leaning where no bicycle should be. They say ordinary moments are where the worst stories begin. Mine started under a red and white awning where the smell of fried chicken clung to the air and laughter held the table together like salt on the rim of a glass. We were sitting outside. There were 4 of us, me, Jenny, Adam, and Cole. We traded stories about teachers and inside jokes about the regulars who treated the place like a second home. We were sitting around talking and having a good time. Across the lot, a figure rolled through the glow that spilled from the windows. He moved with a steady, patient rhythm, feet light on the pedals, hands wrapped in dark fabric. A brim pulled low as if he disliked the light. right away, to me. He seemed kind of strange. The feeling came the way a draft slips along a hallway. Barely there, yet impossible to ignore. He traced a circle through the parking spaces, then another, methodical arcs, as if memorizing the place the way someone memorizes an address. The guy ended up riding into the parking lot and then circling it a few times. He wore black from collar to cuff, the kind of outfit that swallows a person's outline and leaves you guessing where they begin. A hard shell of glasses sat on his face like small windows to somewhere I wasn't invited. Eventually, he parked his bike. He didn't go inside. He didn't call anyone, didn't scroll, didn't pretend to be busy. He stood beside the frame like a stagehand, waiting for a cue only he could hear. When he turned his head, his lenses caught the glow and went pale. And for a heartbeat, it felt like I was being photographed. I told myself it was nothing, only the way reflective glass will mimic eyes. I kept my voice easy, my posture casual, and asked Jenny about her weekend. Adam stole a waffle fry. Cole argued that the sauce had changed, and the world knitted itself back together with the thread of small talk. I stared at my napkin, not him, and built a wall out of harmless conversation. He stayed long enough for me to wonder whether he was waiting on someone, or whether someone had left him and this parking lot was where he came when goodbyes outlasted patience. Standing there, he looked like a person practicing stillness, a person learning how not to be noticed. I hardened my face into indifference, as if that could make me invisible. When I finally risked a glance back, I saw only pavement and a line of empty spaces. At some point, a while later, I noticed that the guy was gone. Relief isn't a celebration, it's the quiet slack of a knot you didn't know you were wearing. I tossed my tray, hugged my friends, and took the long way to my car because the light made the asphalt look like an ocean. I got in my car and I drove back home where I lived with my parents and brother. The drive felt weightless, music low, windows half down, that pleasant emptiness that comes after too much lemonade and laughing. Nothing followed, nothing pressed close in the rear view. If the stranger had eyes for me, they were lost in the city's 1,000 other reflections. Home carried the same reliable shape it always did, sidings pale as powdered sugar, porch rail cool beneath my palm, the door stubborn but familiar. When I got back home, I went inside and then minutes later saw the guy on the bike again. The sight arrived like a bruise appearing under skin. I stood at the front window and looked past the faint ghost of my own reflection. I noticed him out the front window of our house, and he was riding slowly down the street on his bike. I stayed very still, the way you do when a stray dog pauses at your fence line, and watched him glide out of frame. He returned, and again. Each pass wore a groove in my nerves. The tire hum became a thought I couldn't stop thinking. Before long, it appeared as though he was just kind of riding his bike back and forth in front of our house. And maybe he wasn't there for me at all, I said to myself. Maybe he liked the slope of the street or the old maple that made a tunnel of leaves. If you repeat a generous story often enough, it stops sounding like fiction and starts sounding like mercy. Still, the handlebars tipped toward our curb. Then he made a right and turned into our driveway. The moment grew a spine and stood upright inside me. I moved through the living room with the care of someone carrying a brimming glass, the floorboards mapping my hesitation. I wanted another angle, a better view, a way to pin him with more than a fragment through glass. By the time I reached the side window, the driveway was empty except for the dull line of oil stains. But absence is rarely empty. It is a room someone just stepped out of. I peeled back the curtain an inch at a time, feeling like a magician who'd lost her trick. I found my parents where the voices on the television drowned everything else. Words tumbled out of me, thin and urgent. My dad stood, squared his shoulders the way a man will when a boundary is tested, and opened the front door as if expecting to greet a neighbor. Cool air spilled into the hallway. We saw the guy's bike propped up against the garage door, but the man was nowhere in sight. My dad put a hand on the handlebars as if the bike might try to run. He rolled it over the threshold, set it gently against the wall, and shut the door with a quiet finality that felt like a promise he meant to keep. We held our breaths together, listening for the scrape of a shoe on gravel, for the shift of hedge or gate. Thing offered itself. My mother's voice came from the kitchen, tight and steady with the kind of certainty that leaves no room for doubt. My mum called the police at that point. Before that, she said she'd seen him along the fence line, first behind the garage, then slipping toward the back corner where the grass falls away into shadow. The yard is not small. Shrubs knot themselves at the edges. The back corner is a little country of its own. The light there behaves like it has secrets to keep. We waited with every light switched off because light makes you feel like a display. The house settled the way houses do. I watched the bicycle, its reflection faint in the glass of the hallway frame, the curve of the front wheel like a question mark someone had leaned against the wall to rest. Time stretched. Sirens would have been a comfort. Instead, we got quiet, which is colder. The quiet collected in corners and pooled under the table, and I tried to stop my mind from thumbing through the small catalogue of ways strangers choose houses. When the officers finally arrived, they moved with that measured pace, trained into people who have seen enough not to be surprised by anything. When the police got there, we reported what happened, and they looked around a little, but the guy was not found. Flashlights stitched the yard. Voices carried, low and practical, then withdrew. A report was taken, advice offered, keep doors locked, call again if he returns, don't confront, and nothing to be done about the bicycle except hold it, as if it were a message still waiting for its last line. However, we still had his bike. The strangest part came after everyone left. Objects come with stories sewn into them, receipts in jacket pockets, initials on lunchboxes, but this bicycle offered none. No name on the frame, no number we could find without turning it upside down and pawing at it like thieves. My dad, who believes in tidy endings, decided to offer one. He sat at his desk, opened a browser, and typed a note to the world. If this is yours, tell us why you left it and come take it back. He was certain an explanation would arrive with a knock. Days later, the bike leaned in the hallway like a house guest we didn't invite, yet couldn't turn away. We moved around it the way you move around grief. Careful not to jostle. Careful not to stare. The metal cooled each night and warmed each morning with the rest of the house. I told myself, a ring of explanations, a lost courier, a game, a mistake, a man practicing solitude in public. None of them eased the truth that someone had stepped onto our property and tried the shape of our quiet. The ad lived online like a jar set out to catch rain. We checked, and we checked again, and the jar stayed dry. However, nobody answered the ad. The emptiness became its own kind of reply. The bicycle stayed put, a witness without a mouth. I tried to invent a kind reason for it all, that maybe the man lost something in our yard. Maybe he'd been trying to deliver a message to the wrong address. Maybe he simply preferred the geometry of our driveway. This is how you talk to the part of yourself that wants the world to be harmless. In the quiet, though, another thought threaded itself through me. Someone can rehearse your life from the sidewalk and never so much as touch your door. A person can map your thresholds, test the outline of your fear, and leave you to carry the echo. In time, the bicycle turned into a piece of furniture, and the story turned into one of those family legends you keep on a high shelf and take down for guests. I still feel the shape of that moment when the porch light warms the steps and the street goes still in that particular way. It is not the kind of tale with a violent ending, nothing that demands a eulogy or a headline. It is quieter and, in its way, sharper. Thankfully, he never tried to break in or anything, but he did something that lasts longer than broken glass. He taught me how quickly a safe place can learn a stranger's name. Sometimes I imagine the man finding another street, another set of windows to trace. Sometimes I think of the bike alone under someone else's eaves, waiting for a name to walk through the door. I do not need to see him again to understand the lesson he left behind. The lesson is simple and a little cruel. You can feel owned without ever being touched, and once you feel it, you learn new ways to look through glass. Story number 7. The first thing I noticed wasn't his face, but the patience, a practiced stillness that made the air in front of my register feel colder than the rest of the restaurant.
He didn't order, he studied me. It felt like when you realize the window you thought was a mirror has been looking back the whole time.
In the lull between orders, a question pressed against my ribs. Was I the thing he came here for? I told myself it was nothing, just a chatty stranger, but my chest measured the wrong kind of silence, and my hands began to memorize exits. I didn't understand the shape of the danger yet. I only knew it had already learned the shape of me. I worked the front like a metronome. Smiles, totals, receipts, moved the line along. I was working at the front counter, taking orders. A steady rhythm kept me safe. Familiar tasks are a soft shield. If you keep the beat, you can forget the questions your body is asking. I saw this man start to approach me, and I greeted him. His clothes were forgettable. His eyes were not. He positioned himself just close enough that I couldn't ignore him, just far enough that it would be dramatic if I stepped back. Instead of ordering right away, though, he just started to talk to me. He used the kind of voice people reserve for small courtesies, the voice that sounds like a smile set on a timer. The man asked me how I was doing and how work had gone. A dozen easy answers lined up on my tongue. At first, I thought he was just being friendly, and I was happy to answer his questions. There's a script for this, and I knew it by heart. But the script began to fray. Although I did get a sort of bad feeling about him for some reason. He asked questions that tried to pull me into a smaller room, where I lived, what school I went to, whether I had someone who would be waiting for me later. Then he started asking more personal questions. I shortened my words until they were just edges. He asked if I had a boyfriend. He asked if I lived around there, and he asked if I was in school, but the smile on his face didn't change when mine did. There was a line forming. The customers behind him had the good, solid impatience of people who only wanted dinner. By like the 5th question, I was getting kind of weirded out and counting the distance between the register and the door. The door and the parking lot. The parking lot and my car. I tightened my grip on the only power I had. Moving the transaction forward, I asked him what he wanted to order. He turned his attention to the board as if he'd never seen it before. The man then started asking me about the menu like he had never been there before. Somehow he wanted favorites, bestsellers, secret tips. He asked me what my favorite thing was and what the bestsellers were and stuff. His curiosity felt staged, as if he were clearing his throat. He was asking tons of questions that weren't really about food. The man had settled into a posture designed to delay. The guy was now seeming creepy to me and not just friendly, but he had the patience of someone who wasn't here to eat. This guy didn't come across that way. When he finally made a choice, it sounded like a punchline he'd rehearsed. The guy just got a Diet Coke and that was it. He tucked the receipt, like a note, into a pocket that didn't need notes. It almost made me wonder why he even came to Chick-fil-A when all he carried away was condensation and a straw. I did what workers do, kept working. Order, bag, thank you. Next, when I looked up, the man was not gone. I looked up and I saw the guy was still there. He had chosen a spot near the doors. The kind of place you claim when you're waiting to intercept someone who has to pass by you. He was just standing by the doors drinking his Diet Coke and kind of looking at me. He wasn't even pretending to check his phone. He was measuring time by watching me. Then I thought that maybe he was waiting for me. My name tag felt like a key he'd already copied. I told myself not to invent danger. I told myself to trust what my body knew. There's a hum in your bones when you're being studied. I watched him without watching him. I kept breathing through simple tasks. Wipe the counter, restock the cups, check the receipts. Smile. The list was a lifeline I could climb hand over hand. When my shift ended, I walked to the back, hung up my headset. and signed my name out of the system like it mattered. And then the path home ran straight through the doorway he was guarding. When I went to leave the Chick-fil-A, the man was still standing right by the doors. I squared my shoulders and tried to make myself into the kind of person who never thinks about worst-case scenarios. As soon as I walked out, he turned and started walking out with me. The sky outside was bright in a way that insists the world is safe. He asked me if I was glad to be off work. I answered with a shape that meant goodbye. I said yes, and then told the man to have a good night, indicating that we were going our separate ways. He held the word separate as if he could bend it. He made an offer dressed up as kindness. He asked if I needed a ride home, and I said no thanks. I drove. The refusal tasted like metal. Then he asked me if I lived around there. I let the question fall and break at our feet. I completely ignored his question and just said goodnight. I could feel the attention of strangers grazing the scene, like a breeze that notices but does not interfere. Then I went to my car and didn't look back. My keys were ready before I reached the door. The man, thankfully, did not follow me to my car or anything. Relief is a thin fabric. It tears easily. I started the engine and told myself I was already safe. Then I started to drive home. The parking lot unfolded into a familiar road, but when I did, the guy started to follow me. The rearview mirror is a truth serum. It kept reporting the same face. I never had the idea that he would try to follow me home. I practiced the skill of denial for a few blocks. I noticed a car behind me. The knot in my stomach named the driver. It was the same man. The world around us moved as usual. Turn signals, sidewalks, families, but a different story was happening in my lane. I just hoped at first that it was a coincidence until hope had to make room for math. But the closer I got to my house, he was still behind me. I made a decision. I would not drive straight to my door and invite him to learn my life. Streets can be shields if you let them. I lived in a very large neighborhood. It was a map written in cul-de-sacs and patience. There were tons of streets with many houses on each of them. People watered lawns, chased balls, carried groceries. Nobody saw the private storm moving between two cars. It was a neighborhood that was easy to get lost in if you had never been there before. I became the tour guide of a place that did not want him. So, when I entered the neighborhood, I did not go to my house, but just started driving around instead. I turned when I didn't need to turn, and I kept randomly turning and going up and down just about every street. I invented errands for myself, check a mailbox that wasn't mine, admire a tree, pretend I missed a street, pretend I remembered another. My goal was to make him tired of me. Stalkers are allergic to unpredictability. They want a straight line, a soft target. Made myself into a maze. Each intersection felt like a small bet. I took the long loops, the narrow lanes, the cul-de-sacs that forced awkward U-turns. I slowed near groups of people, near the neighbor who always waves, near the dog walker who knows every face. I considered calling the police and rehearsed what I would say, the details I could offer, how I would explain the way my breath kept losing its rhythm. I shouldn't have to justify feeling watched, but I knew the world likes a tidy explanation. I thought about pulling into a driveway that wasn't mine and knocking on a door. I thought about the faces that might open it and the risk I'd spill into their living rooms. I drove like someone knitting a net, each loop another knot to catch him. Behind me, he kept choosing me. He matched my speed with the patience of someone who has practiced. I wanted him to blink and fall out of the rhythm, to miss a turn, to get bored, to realize that following me would not turn into whatever promise he had written in his head. And then, slowly, the pressure changed. His car hesitated at a four-way. He picked the wrong branch. Then, he eventually turned off and left me alone. The empty space in my mirror felt almost unreal, like a trick my fear was playing on me. I didn't reward myself by going home right away, and after that, I finally went to my house, and was very careful to make sure that I didn't see the guy and he was not following me. I took another loop, then another. As if safety needed to be convinced, I pulled into my driveway only when the relief was sturdy enough to hold weight. I locked the door, pressed my back against it, and listened to nothing for a long time. The quiet felt like a bandage. Later, I tried to assign the encounter a genre, as if naming it would shrink it. Was it a misunderstanding? A near miss? A story I would use to teach future me what to do sooner? Part of me wanted to file it under nothing happened. Another part knew that nothing is the most dangerous outcome to mislabel. It trains you to ignore alarms. I reviewed my choices like a witness. What I said, what I didn't say. The way I refused that ride. The way I refused his questions a second time by offering him only silence. I thought of the restaurant again. How ordinary it had looked the whole time. How ordinary the cup in his hand had been. So, the man got his order pretty quickly, and yet he still had hours to spend on me. I replayed the moment I first saw him. The first question. The way he anchored himself by the door as if the door belonged to him. I imagined other versions of the day. Darker ones. It is a strange blessing to realize how many worse stories did not happen because of a decision you made with a shaking spine. As days passed, I kept expecting him to return, to retake his place by the door, to stage the same questions in the same order. I'm just thankful that I never saw him for the rest of my time working at Chick-fil-A. Gratitude arrived like a tide, slow, persistent, cleansing corners fear likes to live in. The feeling didn't make me naive, it made me prepared. I learned to notice patience when it doesn't belong. I learned that my discomfort is evidence enough. I learned the map of every exit. And I learned that sometimes survival is not a dramatic moment but a series of small, stubborn refusals that add up to a life you get to keep. I still think about the way he watched me. He was a really creepy guy. That sentence feels too simple for the complexity of what he took from me and what I refused to give. But simple truths are useful tools. He wanted my route, I gave him confusion. He wanted my door, I gave him a neighborhood that kept refusing to end. He wanted a story where he gets to be the main character. I wrote another ending. I don't owe him more than that. Story number 8. I locked the gate, and the building sighed into silence amongst it all. Slab of glass and steel behind me, while the lot ahead spread like a dry ocean. My car sat alone under a cone of tired light. The only bright thing in a field of painted lanes and empty spaces. A woman lifted her arm from the far edge of that quiet. A small flag in a wind that didn't exist. She asked for help with a car I couldn't see, behind a line of trees that cut the property like a stitched scar. I said yes, and the night said nothing back. The store's music went dead the moment I stepped outside, and the automatic doors exhaled me into a stillness that made every sound feel oversized. It wasn't late by any clock I cared to name. It was that pocket of after hours when a place remembers it is just concrete, glass, and fluorescent bones. My car waited in the wrong corner of the lot because I had parked where I found space earlier, far from crowds I no longer had. Distance looks reasonable in daylight. In an emptied lot, it looks like a dare. The woman appeared where the property narrowed into an elbow of asphalt. She drifted in from a spur lot, screened by shrubs and a handful of stunted pines. Head down as if reading the stripes on the pavement. When she saw me, her face tightened into relief. Or the performance of relief, and she raised her hand in a polite wave. And I don't truck in theatrics. I answered with a nod and kept my pace level. I didn't speed up, I didn't slow down, and people in trouble deserve steadiness more than speed. "Can you help me?" she called. Voice steady enough to suggest she'd practiced the sentence. She walked closer. "My car won't start. I'm stuck right over there by the trees. There's a script for this kind of thing, and I know some of it. I've swapped a tire on gravel in the dark, held a light while someone tightened a belt. bridged a dead battery to a patient one, and watched dashlights bloom and basic, honest tasks. "What's it doing when you turn the key?" I asked. She lifted her hands, palms empty. "No idea. It won't do anything. I don't know anything about cars." She gestured with her chin toward the tree line. "It's not far. Will you just look?" I checked my pockets out of habit. Keys, wallet, phone. The building behind me no longer belonged to me. The lot felt like a rule everyone else had stopped following. The woman had the calm of someone who could afford to wait. The urgency of someone who didn't want to. "If you want to call a roadside service, you can use my phone," I offered. "They'll ask what it's doing. We can tell them." She shook her head. "I'm dead on battery," she said, meaning her phone. "If you could just look first, then I'll call." There's a thin line between kindness and compliance, and it often looks like a painted crosswalk at night, visible, but ignored. I said, "Okay," and followed her toward the corner where the lot folds into the tree strip. We climbed a shallow rise of grass that your shoes forget the moment you level out. Beyond the trees, another lot opened like a side room. Same stripes, fewer lights. The air carried a soft perfume of fryer oil from a chicken place near the curb cut. The smell of salt and comfort. Her car sat alone in the half-light, a silver sedan with an open hood like a raised question. I could see into the engine bay, wires, plastic covers, a battery that may or may not have loved anyone that day. The driver door stood shut. No lights shone inside. She angled toward the front fender. "I'll try the key if you want to listen," she said. It was the right dialogue. It was the right beat in the right act. I took one step toward the passenger side to lean in, not to sit, never to sit. That's when the shrubs at the back edge of the lot breathed. Not with wind, with intention. A man was tucked into the crease where hedges meet fence. The kind of place you only notice if you are looking for wildlife or trouble. He had the color of the shade and the outline of someone who didn't want one. I could see the angle of his shoulders, the way his shoes were already pointed at me like dogs on scent. He wasn't big. He was aligned. "Get in the passenger seat," the woman said, flat voice. Polite urgency. She moved to the driver door. "I'll turn the key. You listen." My mouth asked a question my legs had already answered. "Who's that by the bushes?" I didn't bother to point. I tilted my head the way a dog listens to the back of the house. She didn't turn. "What?" she said. "No one's there." A 5 count of silence opened, and she spent it facing the car. "Not the shrubs. There's no one," she said, like a line she was sure would end the scene. The lot forgot to hum. The chicken place hummed for it. I kept my hands visible and my weight on my heels. "I'm going to head back to my car," I said, polite enough to be mistaken for sorry. "Good luck with yours." I pivoted toward the slope, as if I had remembered an appointment only I could keep. Behind me, her tone sharpened. Not angry, not pleading, just clipped. "Hey, wait, come on." I didn't. The first rule is simple. If your gut breaks the script, you stop the play. I walked, not fast, not slow, not till I heard shoes behind me. Not hers. Different weight, different stride. The shrubs exhaled a man. He stood up in a single motion and came after me like he had already measured the distance and liked the math. I liked my math better. Head start, downhill, open field, keys in my pocket, memory of where the light is good. My body is not a machine built for highlight reels. It is built for carrying boxes and leaning through doorways to ask if anyone needs help in housewares. But even a body made for unremarkable tasks understands a simple calculus. Ground favors the one already moving. I cut to the grass strip and let gravity do the part I'm bad at. The slope turned my careful walk into a run, and the run became something else, a decision wearing legs. Behind me, the man's steps thudded on the far lot's cracked asphalt. then shifted to the stutter of shoes in grass. He was close enough for me to map the sound into distance. The woman's voice rose and snapped off, a command meant for him or me or the night itself. I didn't give any of them the dignity of a look back. Distance is not a thing you turn around to measure. It's a thing you buy one stride at a time. The main lot met me with a second wave of light, brighter, cleaner, comfort as hospitality. My car waited inside that circle, like a lifeboat hanging on its davits. I put my eyes on the driver door handle and refused to look anywhere else. Because gaze is attention, and attention is time. And time is the only currency you can't finance. My pockets held my keys because I had kept them there, and my fingers found the right one because I had done the same motion enough times to own it without thinking. I didn't yank the door, I didn't make noise with it. I opened it like it was mine, which it was, and dropped into the seat. The engine accepted the key like the good half of a relationship. A calm instrument panel woke, soft and ordinary. I put the shifter where I needed it and gave the wheel the gentlest turn that pointed me toward the aisle. The man hit the edge of the light, saw me move, and threw his body forward. If he had taken one step earlier, maybe he would have made the door. He didn't, because I didn't offer him the step. The car rolled, then lurched obediently when I asked it for more. I moved past him with an ocean of air between us. He didn't hit the glass. He didn't try the handle. He just stopped and watched. And the watching told me the important part. I wasn't a target anymore. I was a mistake that had walked away. The exit lanes felt like hallways in a building where no one lives. The road answered my tires, and the property fell behind me in panels of shadow and light. I drove to where people exist, streetlights with purpose, storefronts still cleaning their reflections. An officer parked near a median, scrolling through the end of a shift. I pulled up, explained what I had seen, kept my description functional: a woman with prepared calm, a silver sedan waiting like a prop, a man in the shrubs whose shoes already faced me. The officer's face did a small thing, an acceptance, a quiet note that said this wasn't the first time he had heard this plot. He asked questions. I gave what I had. He sent a unit toward the lot and another toward the side entrance near the chicken place. "Happens more than you'd think," he said. "Not as comfort, just as weather. Most folks don't notice the second player." I nodded. I noticed because the night had been generous, or because my brain, tired of inventory lists and end caps, had found one more thing worth cataloguing: movement that didn't match the scene. I didn't go back. There's a pride that looks like help and a pride that looks like foolishness. I wasn't in the mood to debate which one drives a loop around a block for closure. I went home the way you go home after something you're not ready to name, and I turned locks without making extra meaning of them. I washed my hands as if I could rinse off intention, and sleep didn't come quickly, but when it came, it was plain and heavy and good. The next day, no, not a day, just after, management asked me to write what happened, but I kept it clean of drama. I wrote about lines of sight and distances, and the way the woman avoided looking where my question pointed. I wrote about the man's shoes and the silver car's open hood, and the way the lot's light divided safety from stage. The report looked thin in the folder. No plate number, no names, just a sketch in words, and the stubborn fact that I didn't step where I was instructed to step. Friends later turned it into a game of what-ifs. What if I hadn't looked? What if I had gotten in? What if the man had gotten to the door? I don't play that game. What-ifs are rehearsal for tragedies you don't need to perform. I prefer the plain truth. I saw what mattered, and I moved. What I can tell you is the way the world rearranged itself in the days after. I park where light is not a wish. I keep my keys where my hand already knows to find them. When someone waves me over from a line of trees, my eyes obey the trees first, because nature has better actors than people do. I let roadside professionals be professional, I help in ways that don't ask me to get small inside someone else's plan, and in quiet places where space gets big. I treat kindness like a tool with settings: off, low, high. High is for daylight and crowds, low is for lots with edges, beauty. Off is for dark shrubs with a person who refuses to exist until you name him.
I tell this in first person because it happened to me, but also because that's the only grammar that counts in moments like this. You are the subject, and every verb belongs to you. The woman's story, dead phone, helpless with cars. Just need a quick look, was built to replace my subject with hers. All I had to do was climb into the seat and sit in the sentence she wrote, and all I had to do was be the object.
There's a trick I use now when someone asks for help in a way that guides my feet. I narrate out loud, not for them, for me. I'm going to stand right here. I'll say, if you want to call, use my phone from there. It resets the grammar. It places me back inside my own subject line. It gives space for real need to show up and for rehearsed need to go looking for another stage. If you're reading this for a rule, I don't have one beyond this. Watch for the second set of eyes. Every con is a duet. And the worst duets are the ones you don't hear because one singer knows how to hide in foliage. If you're reading this for a moral, I don't carry those around either. I carry a remembering, a silver car with its mouth open and a pair of shoes already aimed where I stood. I think about the woman sometimes. The way she kept her face arranged, unruffled by my question, unwilling to spend even a glance on the place where reality waited. I think about whether she wanted harm or rent money or just power over a stranger in a dark rectangle of the world. Her motives don't owe me clarity. My choices owe me attention. People love a twist ending. There isn't one. The only twist is that caution, which usually feels small and mean, became the generous thing. It gave me the chance to go on. Gave me an ordinary drive, away from a place that wanted to become a headline. Gave me a normal life, which is not something you notice until someone tries to take it in a parking lot behind some hedges where the lights don't quite reach. I keep the report in a drawer, thin as a paperback brochure. I don't reread it. It's enough to know it's there. A record of a night that stayed only a night, not a story about me on someone else's timeline. The lot at the store still fills and empties. The chicken place still smears the air with salt and heat. The shrubs still look like shrubs. None of that means anything until it does. So here's what I did, and what I would do again. When a stranger tried to position me, I moved. When a script tried to hand me a line, I let the line fall. When I sensed a second player, I stepped out of range. I didn't make a speech. I didn't turn to deliver a final thought to the air. I kept my words inside my lungs and placed my feet where they belonged, on ground that would carry me to a door I own, inside a machine that answers to my key. And because I didn't sit in a seat that wasn't mine, I can sit here now and tell you, if help is needed, it can stand in the light and ask. If help comes with hedges, make your kindness conditional. If someone says, no one is in the bushes, and your eyes say otherwise, believe your eyes.
I am not brave. I am not a hero. I am a person who went home because home was still available. That's enough. That's the ending. No flourish, no applause, only the small, unremarkable joy of putting a key where it belongs and going on.
Story number 9. The face on my screen looked familiar, the way a face looks when you pass it in a bright dining room and think nothing of it, until it looks back from your phone. He said he had my address. The room around me stopped feeling like a room and started feeling like a map with a red pin on it. People talk about intuition as if it's a soft tug, like mine was a hand on the back of my neck. I told myself there had to be a simple reason, some harmless misunderstanding. The grin on the photo refused to agree.
What I remember most is how ordinary everything was. Right before it wasn't
We were just talking and sitting kind of in the back corner of the restaurant at a table. The corner felt safe, bright enough to read the menu, calm enough to let conversation drift. Ashley teased me about lining up sauce packets, as if order on the table could guarantee order in life. I watched the counter, the way people watch aquariums, letting movement settle the mind in a public room. Routine hums like air through a vent, and you start to trust the pattern more than your senses. And that is when a person who shouldn't belong can step into the picture and look like part of it. He arrived with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. It was a guy who appeared to be around our same age, but that his shirt was tucked away. His name tag sat at a careful angle, and he moved with the crisp ease of someone who has explained the same special 100 times. He told us how they were doing some contest, and if we signed up, we would get a gift card. The smile that came with it suggested a private perk handed to us in plain sight, like we were being let in on something harmless and small. I glanced at Ashley. She made the universal face that means, why not? Ashley and I both did it. And the guy then walked away. The form was simple. Name, number, address, a box granting permission to contact. But before leaving, he gave us these Chick-fil-A $5 gift cards. The plastic felt new, edges clean, barcode glossy. Authenticity can wear a uniform, and so can a lie. We finished our food and talked about forgettable things. I slipped the card into my bag and didn't think about it again. Normal life glides forward on autopilot. Your feet keep moving while your attention drifts. My phone lit with a message written in a friendly tone that didn't feel friendly. I got a text on my phone from somebody who I did not know. The name field was blank. The first word tried too hard to sound harmless. He said, "Hi," and I asked who it was. The reply arrived with a photo. The same face from the counter. Eyebrows raised. A grin that stopped short of the eyes. It seemed like he had a creepy smile on his face. It looked practiced, polished to pass inspection at a glance. I asked why he had my number. He pointed to the contest and then lifted the mask with a single line. Then he said that he didn't even work at Chick-fil-A. The room narrowed to the glow of the screen. My name collapsed into a line on a form. My address felt like a doorway shown to a stranger who hadn't earned a key. I told him to erase my information and leave me alone. He didn't. More messages arrived, offers to meet, talk, make it right, show me a second gift. I ignored each one. The phone rang with a call and I let it go. It flashed with a video request. I let that fade too. He responded with an emoji and then typed the question that turned my home into a diagram pinned in his mind. Then the guy said that he had my address and asked when he should come over. There are sentences that change a place. A house is a home until a stranger tells you he has directions to it. I answered with a message designed to end the conversation. I described a father who shared the lease and a cabinet that did not hold kitchenware. I made it clear the door was not a question he wanted to test. The typing indicator flickered, went still, and vanished.
I blocked the number and sat very still, counting my breath until my body believed I had done something useful. Fear doesn't need sound. It sits beside you and studies the same door you're studying.
The door did not move. The house stayed ordinary. A table with a stack of mail, a rug that never lays flat at one corner, a coat resting on a chair because I never bothered to hang it. Familiar objects looked exactly the same, and yet each one felt like a checkpoint a stranger could pass. I called Ashley. She picked up quickly, steady in the way she gets when she knows I'm trying to sound fine. I told her everything. She said a message had hit her phone too, and she had blocked it without replying. Relief pressed against irritation at myself for offering the creep more words than he deserved. We agreed to speak with the manager and retell the whole thing plainly. The dining room looked unchanged, bright, clean. trays sliding across tables, ice shifting in cups. The citrus-sweet smell of lemonade syrup. We asked for the manager, a compact man with a practiced smile that faltered when he heard about a contest he didn't recognize. He led us into a small office with a corkboard of schedules and a whiteboard of goals. He listened, he took notes. He opened a binder, scrolled a staff list, checked a uniform inventory, and compared our description to photos of current employees. His face settled into the careful expression people wear when they're dealing with something that isn't supposed to happen here. We handed him the cards. He turned them over, felt the edges, scanned the codes with a tablet. The reading failed. He tried again. It failed again. He pulled a genuine card from a drawer and set it beside ours. The differences were small but unmistakable. A barcode slightly too heavy, microprint that blurred under magnification, a logo trimmed tighter than the brand guide allowed. He copied our screenshots, noted the phone number, and opened an incident report. He offered to contact corporate and, if we wanted, to relay everything to the police. We said yes to the report and the forwarding. He apologized on behalf of a brand that wasn't at fault and moved into practical mode. Ask staff to watch the dining room. Confirm uniforms at the start of each shift. Bag the counterfeit cards for whoever might need evidence later. Ashley and I lingered in the doorway as a new line formed. The world beyond our heads kept moving in its reliable way. I kept thinking about that back corner, the way that angle gives you the illusion of privacy while placing you in a perfect frame for anyone already watching. Privacy in public is a false wall, solid enough to lean on, thin enough for a determined person to see through. We left with a simple plan. We added a camera app to our phones. We shared our phone locations with each other. We saved the number he used and the phrases he liked so we could spot them again. And small steps can feel like nothing and like armor at the same time. At home. I set the fake card on the table and studied it. The font looked right. The plastic felt right. The gloss looked right. The lie lived in the details, a line too thick at the edge of the barcode, a number set in a typeface the real cards don't use. Whoever printed it had good examples and better equipment. Whoever printed it also trusted that most people don't stare long enough to notice. I rewound the entire scene until the man stood beside our table again. He must have rehearsed the approach, not the counter, not the doorway, but the exact angle where he could catch our attention without drawing anyone else's. But he didn't ask us to move, he didn't posture. He slid into our conversation as if his presence were a given. That was the trick. Pretend long enough, and people accept your performance as the backdrop. It would be easy to turn this into a ghost story, a grin, a threat, a knock that never arrives. It would be easy to let fear write the script. So I made a list instead. A man in a dining room pretended to belong. He offered something almost real. He harvested names and addresses. He pushed when he wasn't given attention. He hinted at showing up, then quieted when the door he wanted to test sounded fortified. Maybe he was alone, but maybe he wasn't, and either way, he was willing to make strangers feel small so he could feel large. I changed a few habits. The porch light stays on, not because light is magic, but because it shortens shadows to a reasonable length. I don't hand out my address on forms that beg to collect it. If someone wants a number tied to my name, they can have the one that exists for situations like this, living on a separate phone in a drawer when someone smiles too hard while asking for tiny pieces of me. I excuse myself and watch what they do next. Real employees are patient. Pretenders hurry. Ashley jokes about me carrying 2 wallets. She says I'll leave one on a table and forget which is the decoy. I tell her that if a stranger wants the wrong version of me, let them have that. The real one drinks lemonade in the back corner with her best friend and treats attention like currency. Sometimes a message drops in from an unfamiliar number. I read the preview and delete if it feels off, the way you close a window to keep the air from turning cold. On rare occasions, someone writes to say they found my information somewhere and want to return a card or a package that never reached me. I meet in places with cameras and witnesses, and I leave the door at home locked.
I don't know what the man in the dining room wanted. Maybe it was simple. Power borrowed from a brand uniform. Attention won by a neat little trick. Maybe it was more. My mind can draft 1,000 versions, and none are as useful as the one I can live with. He didn't get what he came for. He left with less than he expected. The rest is a form in an office, an entry in a report, a warning shared between friends.
Some stories end in a dramatic chase. Mine settles into a kind of vigilance that doesn't ask for applause. I watch the corners of rooms. I notice the badges on shirts and the way eyes move when someone claims authority. I practice not explaining myself when I don't owe an explanation. I learned what I needed to learn in a bright dining room that felt familiar until it didn't. And I pass it on to anyone who will listen. Trust the feeling that tightens your grip on your own life. It is not drama, it is defense. Story number 10. I cleaned the last tray and looked up to see a stranger ignore the counter and choose the shadows of the dining room instead. A uniform can feel like armor until a customer steps onto a table and the room turns theatrical. The menu boards glowed while chairs skittered, and my pulse tried to keep a steady beat. We asked him to stop. The only answer was furniture shifting and the slow stretch of minutes that refused to end. By closing, we were not serving food anymore, we were serving composure, passing it carefully from one coworker to the next. And I worked at a Chick-fil-A. I knew the rhythm of the place, the rise and fall of conversations, the soft hum of equipment, the way the smell of waffle fries clung to my sleeves. I came to hand people small comforts in paper bags and leave them a little better than I found them. Chick-fil-A was by far my favorite, not for grand reasons, but for quiet ones. A team that lifted when you sagged, managers who noticed, regulars who waved as if you were part of their day. That night, the store eased toward close. The ice machine breathed its last cycles. The floor shone from a fresh mop, and the kitchen heat relaxed back into steel. I was the only person left working behind the counter to take people's orders. 2 guests lingered over melting ice and conversation, and the dining room slipped into a gentle lull that made routine feel like a promise. There were a couple of people inside the dining room, maybe like 2 or 3. I stacked sauces, wiped the counter, and watched the door open on a late craving. At about 10 minutes before closing or so, I remembered that a man walked in. He did not drift toward the register like everyone else. Instead, though, the man turned and then walked into our dining area and kind of out of my sight. I assumed he wanted a seat before deciding. Hospitality trains you to give space, to trust the best version of a stranger. Wrappers crinkled, chairs nudged back under tables, and those last guests slipped out into the evening. Now, the dining room appeared empty at glance, but I knew that the man was still in there somewhere because I hadn't seen him leave. The checklist tugged at me, filters cooling, bins labeled, corners checked. When it was time to close, one of my co-workers came over to lock the doors. I raised a hand to pause her and stepped into the dining room. I moved slow, giving the room a kind of respect you give a sleeping animal. The play area light washed a pale rectangle across the tiles. A napkin shifted in the air like a lazy moth. My pulse trimmed down to quiet. Then the quiet split. From the far corner, a figure unfolded from shadow, and the simple act of standing felt like a warning. I came within a safe distance and kept my voice low and steady. The way you speak to a friend who is trying to find their footing. I told him we were closed, that I could still get him water, that we wanted him safe. The words seemed to reach him and then slide past. He brushed by my shoulder toward the front with sudden energy and then veered. He put a foot on a chair, hoisted himself up, and balanced on a tabletop. It was not a show. It was a person whose sense of gravity had slipped its anchor. I angled my body to keep him from the glass and measured my steps as if the floor were rearranging itself beneath us. My co-worker read my face and stepped out of the kitchen, calm, layered over focus. She moved toward the entry to prevent him from bolting. I held the line near the soda tower. We tried the playbook. Keep distance, speak simply, protect the room. His attention ricocheted from menu board to ceiling vent to light to chair, never settling long enough for judgment to land. He jumped down, crouched, sprang to another table, skidded, recovered, tried again. The laminate caught his shoes and released them with a scuff that made me imagine bone meeting edge. I kept my tone even and available, a handrail he could catch. My teammate phoned our manager. Another hovered near the kitchen to guide any stray customer away. I started to tell him that we were closed now. It was the only sentence that felt true and safe. He looked through me as if words were printed in a language he had not learned yet, but he did not leave. The room turned into a map of hazards, glass, corners, metal. We curved our bodies to block the worst of them without closing him in. Someone gave our address to emergency services, voice level and practical. We added details like breadcrumbs, male, restless, climbing, still mobile, no injuries yet. As minutes stretched, a strange compassion crept in alongside the fear. I wondered who expected him home. I wondered whether his phone was lighting up in a pocket with a name he trusted. We asked him to sit. He scanned the room as if reading signs only he could see. We offered water. His focus slid away. The doors stayed shut. We kept our spacing. The restaurant felt like a stage set. Every prop a potential hazard and every line a chance at de-escalation. I thought about the kids who wore paper crowns at these very tables, and the parents who exhaled relief over a quiet meal after a hard day. I pictured them as reasons to get this right. The minutes carried weight, but they moved. The man's energy sputtered, steadied, then rose again. He paused for the first time. And in that tiny stillness, I saw a person, not a problem, a person who had gotten loose from the edges of himself. When the spell broke, he ran again, then slowed, then pressed palms to a tabletop as if testing the earth. We guided him away from the glass and kept a lane clear for first responders. Red and blue reflections finally swam across the windows and slid over the tile. The officers entered with a different kind of quiet, the kind made from posture and care. They did not rush. They made a boundary he could understand. Shoulders loosened. Commands came low and even. He tensed, scanned their faces, then allowed the instructions to guide him. A medical would evaluate him. Paperwork would follow. Adrenaline would drain from our hands. We surveyed the room like checking a friend for bruises. The condiment rack leaned at an angle. A chair leg had split. A sticky constellation of soda dotted the tiles. We did the practical things first because practical things remind your body that it still knows how to put order back where it belongs. We righted tables, gathered lids, reset chairs, tugged the welcome mat into line. We bagged the mess and swept the last grains of salt into a small snowbank. My co-worker wiped a smear from the glass and met my eyes with that look people share when they have weathered the same storm. I nodded. I thought about his face, focused and lost at once, and about how thin the membrane is between ordinary and unmoored. Service work seats you at the hinge of other people's lives. Sometimes you are there for the clause where a life misfires. You offer a comma and hope it is enough. I locked the doors, washed my hands until the smell of sanitizer faded to a memory, and stood a moment in the quiet kitchen with the lights low. Outside, the parking lot looked calm in that way empty spaces do, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. I sat in my car and let the engine idle while my breathing evened out. On the drive home, I replayed the night in short clips, the step onto the table, the slow spin of a salt shaker, the measured voices at the end, and felt gratitude rise like a tide for small protocols that hold when people do not. At home, I showered, changed, and wrote down everything I could remember so the report would be honest and clear. I texted my team goodnight and felt the comfort of their replies stack like bricks. Sleep did not come quickly. But when it did, it was clean and blank, the kind that resets the room in your head. Morning would bring mops and new ice and the familiar weight of an apron. Routine is not a cure, but it is a promise. Work gives you another chance to practice being steady when the world tilts. That was the craziest thing that ever happened to me when I worked at Chick-fil-A.